Okay, everybody. So we're gonna continue and hopefully finish the B101 2017. Last time we spoke about um, the Article A that deals with dispute resolution and the different ways in which we can resolve matters. We spoke about mediation, arbitration, and litigation. Um, and we spoke about a little bit of consolidation and joinder and those topics regarding dispute resolutions. Disputes are bound to happen, as you know. It's just part of being a human being. Disagreements and tensions happen in every project. So that's kind of why they have that on the AIA contract B101 2017. Now, another thing that happens other than trying to resolve disputes is termination and suspensions of the work. And Article 9, we're going to now touch upon those different scenarios. There may be even more. As you know, no contract is all inclusive, sort of all comprehensive. It would just be too big of a contract to actually accommodate for everything that happens on a project. And as you know, there are multiple versions of the B101 sort of series of contracts by the AIA. Some of them are not the B101. They have different names, but they're different contracts depending on the project type and size. For the purpose of the AREs, we are focused on the B101 2017. So Article 9, termination or suspension. 9.1. If the owner fails to make payments to the architect in accordance with this agreement, such failure shall be considered substantial non-performance and cause for termination, or at the architect's option, cause for suspension of performance of services under this agreement. So that first article kind of makes it clear, makes one thing clear, that the owner's like almost number one responsibility is to make payment. And if they don't make payment, it's considered a substantial breach of contract. It's not just like a minor little breach of contract, like a decision that wasn't kind of made. It was like it's a reason to terminate the contract. Um and or suspend, it can cause suspension or termination. Is the option of the architect. It gives the architect the option of that. Then it says, if the architect elects to suspend services, the architect shall give 7 days written notice to the owner before suspending services. You just can't make that decision without letting them know. You have to let them know with 7 day notice that you will be basically stopping the work. Oh, sorry, on your work. By the way, I don't want to confuse you with the word stop the work, because stop the work during construction is not a thing that we do as architects. We can stop our work as architects for our services during the performance of this agreement for non-payment. And again, 7 days written notice. Okay, it's written. It cannot be just a phone call. There should be a follow-up email if there is a phone call. It has to be put in writing. Um, and now, does anybody know why we have to let them know that we're suspending the work? Like, why do we have to let them know? Hey, listen, you haven't paid me. I'm gonna suspend the work in 7 days. Why do we have to do that? Why don't we just stop the work in our architecture services altogether without having to say anything?
so that, so that they have they can find somebody else to work on the project.
Well, yeah, that may be that's a good reason. Yes, so that they can kind of accommodate and find
With
somebody else if
time
they
and
need to.
money.
Yeah, but I think more pressing than that is the fact that the owner wants a project done, and they want it done by certain deadline. And as you know, in this agreement, they put a goal for when substantial completion will be done, and hopefully final completion on the project. So if that deadline isn't met, there are consequences. There may be holding costs for the property, mortgage costs, things like that. Um, and they don't want to do that. Those costs may exceed by far the cost of the architect's services. So they wouldn't want to do that. They wouldn't want this situation to hold the project by a month or so without them making a solution, finding a solution. So this kind of puts them on the radar, and it's also, it's the right thing to do to give people notice. Now, When we're talking about suspension, we're not talking about suspension because they missed a month or like they missed by a few days or anything like that. We're talking about they just haven't really paid us. It wasn't really an error on the mail. The check hasn't come through. It wasn't like the customary thing. It's, yeah, it's been a month or it's been over 16, 18 days. It hasn't been paid. That's a problem. We got to do something. I would opt for this. Um, well, you got to know your clients. I don't want to put my 2 cents on that stuff. It all depends on the client. There are clients that I don't mind if they take a month to pay me. There are other ones that I do, and it's because of the relationship that we have with them. And if there is a client that we work with and it's repeat work, repeat client, always consistent, I don't even check to see whether they've paid. If I know they're gonna pay. If it's a new client, as soon as it's a month, I'll be like, hey, actually, as soon as it's a few days, I'll be like, hey, just reminder, we haven't gotten paid. What's going on? So, on that end, if the architect elects to suspend the services again, I'm gonna repeat that. Um, you shall give 7 days notice, and that's a good number. That's a number that comes along a lot. It comes up during construction evaluation. It comes up during project management. It comes up during practice management. Suspension of the work, 7 days written notice. Right? Whenever, like, the number seven is very important. There are other numbers that I want you to know, and I probably have noted them throughout these presentations. Like, 10 days I think is for something, and then 14 days for something else. There's some days that are very important, and I want you to do quizzes on them, when and why. Um, and then again, in the event of a suspension of services, the architect shall have no liability to the owner for delay or damage caused the owner because of such suspension of services. Sorry, guys. Oh, wow. God, what's going on? What they're talking about is, liquidated damages, consequential damages, any issues because the project is not being delivered on time. We don't want to get sued for that. So we're not liable for it. Before resuming services, the owner shall pay the architect all sums due prior to suspension and any expenses incurred in the interruption and resumption of the architect's services. Our work got suspended for a project all the way back in March when the world hit a new phase. And it wasn't until like a week ago that they came back to us and told us that, hey, we're actually moving on with some other office. We had already signed contract. We already had signed an agreement. So what's the right thing to do here? Well, they have to pay us for the suspension time, and if they wanted to resume for the resumption of this of our services, they have to pay a fee for the resuming. Now that's if we are using the B101 2017, and my course of action right now is I have to read our contract and see if there is any funds that are owed to us, and we'll figure it out. They're a very nice client. We love them. They love us too. It's just, they went with somebody else for some other reasons. It has nothing to do with us. Um, so the architect's fees for the remaining services and the time schedules shall be equitably adjusted. Okay, so it gets all pushed back. So it isn't just saying, owner, don't stop paying. It really isn't fun for you. It's gonna be bad. So section 9.2, if the owner suspends the project, the architect shall be compensated for services performed prior to the notice of such suspension. When the project is resumed, the architect shall be compensated for expenses incurred in the interruption and resumption of the architect's services. The architect fees for the remaining services and the time schedules shall be equitably adjusted. By the way, I can really see these as a check three that apply situation. The owner has suspended the architect's services. Which of the following are the appropriate course of action? One, when the project is resumed, the architect shall be compensated for expenses incurred. Two, the architect fees for the remaining services at the time the schedule shall be equitably adjusted. Three, the architect shall call his lawyer. They do something like that. Four, the architect shall not work with that client anymore and pursue other means of remediation. And they will put something like in accordance with Article A, you know, dispute resolution method, something very like elaborate that actually isn't a thing. Um, so just look at that. And I like how they phrased it. It is perfectly phrased for a question, really. Section 9.3. If the owner suspends the project for more than 90 cumulative days for reasons other than the fault of the architect may terminate this agreement by giving not less than 7 days written notice. Mm. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry. I guess I need coffee. So if the owner suspends the work again, what it's saying is 90 days. They didn't really call you. They didn't really say anything to you. They just stopped the work for 90 days. They didn't pay you or anything like that. Um, you give 7 days written notice, and then you just say, well, we're not proceeding with this work right now. We're you got to make it clear that you're no longer working on the project. Section 9.4, and a bill might do that, like his or services rendered to this point, and should you want to proceed, we'll have to issue a new contract and a new project because this is done. 9.4, either party may terminate this agreement upon not less than 7 days written notice should the other party fail substantially to perform in accordance with the terms of this agreement through no fault of the party initiating the termination. What it's saying is, hey, the architect isn't performing his work, let's say, for instance, and the owner, I'm sorry, I was going to say contractor doesn't exist in this one right now. We're B101, we're talking about owner and architect, and the owner hasn't paid the architect. Well, the owner shouldn't be coming to you and say, well, you haven't done any of the work, when the architect actually given a suspension notice because they haven't gotten paid. It's not the fault of the architect that he hasn't completed the work. So you shouldn't terminate me for me not doing the work when you have defaulted on your duty to pay. Does it make sense? It could be all the way around. The architect hasn't done his job, and he's saying, "Hey, I'm gonna with the 7 days notice. Say within 7 days we're gonna stop the work. We're not gonna work on your project anymore." But it is a case that the architect has just not been doing his work. He hasn't been performing. He hasn't been responsive. He hasn't been talking. Then in that case, the architect can't terminate. You know, under this section 9.4. All right. So, and then 9.5, the owner may terminate this agreement upon no less than 7 days notice to the architect for the owner's convenience and without cause. Yeah, on the section 9.5, they can say, listen, I'm no longer continuing with the project. Oh my gosh, I really need a coffee. I'm sorry, guys. The owner may terminate the agreement. Again, it's just like, well, for no reason at all. I just want to stop the work altogether. I'm no longer doing the project. That's it. So they can do that. Section 9.6, if the owner terminates this agreement for its convenience pursuant to section 9.5, or the architect terminates this agreement pursuant to section 9.3, which is the suspension, the owner shall compensate the architect for services performed prior to the termination, reimbursable expenses incurred, and costs attributable to termination, including the costs attributable to the architect's termination of consultant agreements. So you got to pay the consultants and blah blah blah. So the owners got to pay you, some things like that. All right. Then we go to section 9.7. In addition to any amounts paid under section 9.6, if the owner terminates this agreement for its convenience pursuant to section 9.5, or the architect terminates this agreement pursuant to section 9.3, the owner shall pay to the architect the following fees. I like this. I should put this in my agreement. I don't have this, I don't think. A termination fee. You terminated me, or I terminated you because you didn't pay me. You got to pay me a fee. You can put any number you want in there. I mean, reasonable. You can put any number. The number should be a number that compensates you for your trouble, for your time, for the time wasted not only not doing that job, but not getting another job because you might have not been able to complete the other job in a time, right? If you're a solo architect, this is very critical because you can only handle X amount of projects per day, per week, per month. If you're a big firm, even if you're a big firm, if this project is big enough, it's taking on a lot of people of your staff members, and you've already budgeted that they will be working on that project. So that's costing you money, overhead money, payroll, burden, and things like that. So you got to put a number that's equitable to the amount of liability costs, incurred and to be incurred for the termination. Licensing fee. If the owner intends to continue using the architect's instruments of service, there should be a licensing fee. I like that. You know what it means? It means, hey, listen, you're gonna continue using my drawings. You gotta pay me a fee of like $1,000 or whatever you deem necessary. Okay, for using your instruments of service. It's like we pay a fee, a licensing fee for private licenses, right? And whether we use them or not, because we have the authority to use them, unless you cancel that. So I'm not trying to say we're the same as a regular license, but our drawings do have that power of being licensed because they're our instruments of service. 9.8, except as otherwise expressly provided herein, this agreement shall terminate 1 year from the date of substantial completion. Why is it 1 year from the date of substantial completion, guys? Section 9.8. Miranda, you know the answer.
Is it because of the contractor's warranties on the project last for a year after construction is complete?
Yeah, so the contractor's got a year after substantial completion to go fix anything that they've done wrong, and you have to do with no additional cost a visit within that 1 year, and that's kind of your last blessing. It's over. We're done, right? So you go and do that 1 year visit, and that's when it should end. So it's telling you whether you even do that or not, it should end by then, right? So and it also says except otherwise, you could say it right here. You could write right next to it. Listen, this agreement will end at substantial completion. Period. You can modify that. So section 9.9, the owner's right to use the architect's instruments of service in the event of termination of this agreement are set forth in Article 7, which we spoke about, instruments of services, and section 9.7, okay? Which is that termination fee, licensing fee. And that is it for Article 9, termination or suspension. Very short, but very, very involved. I would want you to read that multiple times, make some flashcards or something so that you know, hey, when do I terminate? When did they terminate rightfully? Do I get paid? What do I need? What happens? What happens now? I mean, and that's something that you never expect. It's like almost like getting laid off. Like you don't expect it. You're like, what do I do now? And those are like the shocking moments in which a contract help you figure out what to do. Article 10, miscellaneous provisions. These are pretty good ones too. I'm gonna try to rush through them. So 10.1, this agreement shall be governed by the law of the place where the project is located, excluding that jurisdiction choice of law rules. If the parties have selected arbitration as the method of binding dispute resolution, the Federal Arbitration Act shall govern. Section 8.3. It's just really saying, not where you are licensed as an architect, where your office is located, but where the project is located is where the law should rule. All right? You don't bring your own law with you. Section 10.2, terms in this agreement shall have the same meaning as those in AIA document A201 2017, general conditions of the contract for construction, which is recommended for you guys to read for project management and, more importantly, for construction evaluation. Section 10.3, the owner and architect respectively bind themselves, their agents, successors, assigns, and legal representatives to this agreement. Neither the owner nor the architect shall assign this agreement without the written consent of the other, except that the owner may assign this agreement to a lender providing financing for the project if the lender agrees to assume the owner's right and obligations under this agreement, including any payments due to the architect by the owner prior to the assignment. Section 10.4, if the owner requests the architect to execute certificates, the proposed language of such certificates shall be submitted to the architect for review at least 14 days prior to the requested dates of execution. The certificates are certificates of payment is one of them. and there's language in there. You want to make sure you read what you're certifying, because you certify to the owner what, right? And I want you guys to look into what a certificate for payment looks like. Go to the AIA website and find a certificate for payment and read it. It's very important. You got to know what you're certifying. What are you certifying? It's almost like when you're stamping something. Why are you stamping? You got to know, and you got to be reasonably informed about it. Okay. If the owner requests the architect to execute consents reasonably required to facilitate assignment to a lender, the architect shall execute all such consents that are consistent with this agreement, provided the proposed consent is submitted to the architect for review at least 14 days prior to execution. This is one of those 14 days situations, both ways. If the owner wants you to certify something, they gotta give you the language 14 days prior to you having to certify. And if the owner wants you to, you know, execute consents, you got to do it. You got to know about it 14 days prior to the execution. The architect shall not be required to execute certificates or consents that would require knowledge, services, or responsibilities beyond the scope of this agreement. What it's saying is that the consents that the architect is going to execute got to be reasonable and prudent for any architect within the same, right? You get it. The same situation, such and such, standard is the standard of care. It's got to be within the standard of care. With that being said, I'm gonna pause here for a second. Miranda, you can pitch in, help out, anything you want. I'm gonna pause the video for a second, and I will resume it very quickly. All right. All right. So we're gonna continue in section 10.5. Nothing contained in this agreement shall create a contractual relationship with or a cause of action in favor of a third party against either the owner or the architect. Do you guys know what that means? Like, is there a contractual relationship established in here between the architect and the contractor, the builder?
No,
No, that's right. Is there a contractual relationship established in here between the owner and the contractor?
B101, no.
It's just between the owner and the architect. And anybody that represents the owner is under the owner. And everybody that represents the architect is under the architect. Nobody else. 10.6. Unless otherwise required in this agreement, the architect shall have no responsibility for the discovery, presence, handling, removal, or disposal of, or exposure of persons to hazardous materials or toxic substances in any form at the project site. Love it. This is a big one. I want you guys to think about that. So the contractor is doing some work on an existing adaptive reuse project and they find asbestos. Is the architect at fault in any way or responsible for it in any way? No. Who is responsible for that? It's kind of like a bit a 201 kind of question, but still, who is responsible for that?
Owner.
That's right. Anything that's got to do with the site, hazardous materials or conditions, existing conditions, is on the owner and the owner alone. Section 10.7, the architect shall have the right to include photographic or artistic representations of the design of the project among the architect's promotional and professional materials. Love it. Sometimes I wonder about that, right? Like have projects that I have done and they're sort of confidential, but to some extent they're my work. I should be able to showcase them. And there's more to this question, but at the end of the day, your project is your project. Photos of the project are your photos of the project. It's your project. So if I go and photograph a project, it's I mean, ideally we're friends, the client and I, and we're good. Not friends, but we got a good relationship, and they wouldn't have any issues. But I know of at least one instance in which a client, not that he has denied it, he didn't deny it, but wasn't really friendly to a photo shoot. He wasn't really receptive to a photo shoot. He was like, nah, you know. So it happens from time to time, but we have the right to include that in our website, in our marketing materials, and all of that stuff. And look at this next section, and very important. The architect shall be given reasonable access to the completed project to make such representations. Right? So yeah, I gotta get a little pin to go in there and take photos. Yes, that's right. It's all by right. Now, my personal contract, I don't think has anything like this. I wish it did. But the thing is, most of our clients, 100% almost 99% of our clients are okay with us taking pictures of the project. They have no issues with that. So why even put it? So, however, the architect's material shall not include the owner's confidential or proprietary information. If the owner has previously advised the architect in writing of the specific information considered by the owner to be confidential or proprietary. So they got to first let you know. If you never knew that something was confidential, you should never be. I mean, you can ask, hey, is it okay if I, is there, and I actually, the question will be, is there anything confidential within this project now that we've completed it that you believe I shouldn't show in my website or in any materials? We want to do, proper promotions of this, and they'll let you know. But they should have let you know prior also, so that it doesn't leak. All right. So the owner shall provide professional credit for the architect in the owner's promotional material for the project. That's in accordance to the AIA. Remember, I told you there was somebody that didn't give any credit to us for a project we did. It's the house has been sold for like 1.2 million. Not whatsoever. They're talking like they were a construction company and they suddenly became a design build company with our design. Like they're not even saying anything about us or names or anything like that. But I don't think my agreements at that time when we started that project said anything about it. Um, and we didn't think they would come to the point where they wouldn't even want to give us credit for some reason. Project came out amazing, and there's another project. There were two. They're coming out very well, very nice. This section 10.7 shall survive the termination of this agreement unless the owner terminates this agreement for cause pursuant to section 9.4. I'm actually going to try to make peace with these people anyway, because I like to keep things happy, everybody happy. So again, this section is critical for you. So when you're wondering like, oh, I've done work, I've done this, I've done that. Yeah, you have the right to showcase that work. If you that work as an architect or designer, and you're using the B101 contract, you have the right to that. Section 10.8, if the architect or owner receives information specifically designated as confidential or business proprietary, the receiving party shall keep such information is strictly confidential and shall not disclose it to any other person except as set forth in section 10.8.1. This section 10.8 shall survive the termination of this agreement. Even beyond the fact that you've already stopped the work and you're no longer involved in the project, you cannot disclose it. 10.8.1. When I read that, because they reference it. The receiving party may disclose confidential. You know what the receiving party means, right? If I'm giving you the information, I'm the sender. You're the receiver. I am giving you such information. You got to keep it confidential. Because I'm telling you that, and then you're the receiving party. And the receiving party may disclose confidential or business proprietary information after 7 days written notice to the other party. And I'm adding the word written notice because that's the only way the notice should be given. But you've seen it, it's written. 7 days notice to the other party when required by law. Guess what? Is what you're doing. It's dangerous. It's illegal, maybe. There may be something that you got incriminated into. You got to give it because that's the law of the land. And that's above all law or anything, any rules, or, that's it. So if you get a subpoena, if you get a summons, a court order, or some sort of way that you got to disclose it in arbitrator's order, you got to give it. So again, when required by law, arbitrator's order or court order, including a subpoena or other form of compulsory legal process issued by a court or governmental entity, or to the extent such information is reasonably necessary for the receiving party to defend itself in any dispute. The receiving party may also disclose such information to its employees, consultants, or contractors in order to perform services or work solely and exclusively for the project, provided those employees, consultants, and contractors are subject to the restrictions on the disclosure and use of such information as set forth in this section 10.8. Like for instance, their projects are confidential here at Flow. Everybody here at Flow is being bound by that confidentiality agreement that I may sign on behalf of the office. Now, wouldn't it be smart to let everybody know at the office that this project is confidential so that they know about it? Yeah. Now, um, I've worked at offices where they have I mean, I was a kid and they have me sign all kinds of things. And I just wanted to get to work. It was exciting, new office, getting a check, I have health insurance, great. There were a lot of things I wish I never signed. And there were a lot of things I wish I even asked about. Because, for instance, there were things being written in there, and this is just my little grain of salt and knowledge for you, being said in there that, like, should I quit that job and go to another office, I wouldn't even be able to call the consultants that they used at that particular office. So what am I saying? Am I saying that they kind of own the consultants too, even though the consultants are their own entity? Yeah, they've kept them confidential, and such mechanical, electrical, and plumbing company, I couldn't hire them. I couldn't call them. I couldn't talk to them. It was just bizarre. And it was for about 5 years that I couldn't do that. 5 years from departure. And you're like, so, it's hurting. It's really hurting the MEP services company, because who do you hire? Like, if you go from one office to another and you work with some structural engineer, who is the first person you would want to call if you had a good relationship with them? That's the first one you would want to call. So they're kind of burning bridges for you and for the other structural engineer or mechanical engineer. In that case, they're almost acting like they own that company, and they don't. Why would you do that? But they own you at the moment you sign that. That's what they do. They own who you work with. So, and they also made me sign non-compete agreements, which makes sense. But those non-compete agreements should be signed while I'm working there. Like, I shouldn't be able to compete with the company. But after I left, I should be able to do whatever I want. Not really. So you got to be careful what you sign, all the paperwork you sign. I got nothing to worry about. You haven't signed much here, Flo. Um, so because they can prohibit you from doing certain things. I mean, whether it's enforceable in law or not, it's a question. But they get you scared, and they can get you scared. You're like, I'm not messing with that, because I don't know. I don't have a lawyer. I don't have money. So be careful what you read. But then this one is talking about that the receiving party is the person that gets it. And if they give it to somebody else, that person has to sign a non-disclosure agreement, an NDA, a confidentiality agreement with you, so that they also are bound. That's what it's saying here. Okay. Section 10.9, the invalidity of any provision of the agreement shall not invalidate the agreement on or its remaining provisions. I keep saying this to you guys, and it's because if the agreement says, Miranda Fortsky instead of Miranda Brodsky, well, the name isn't right. No, well, wait a minute. We know we're talking about Miranda. Don't make the whole agreement wrong because that provision that mentions her name on that particular instance is wrong. All right. She did sign it, and it said Miranda Brodsky, not Fortsky, right? So that's what it's saying. It's saying that if something here, because the law changes, right? We have lawmakers out there. We got things happening. And because the law changed and this agreement wasn't updated with the law or with the statute of limitation or whatever, the standard of care may be increased by whatever reason. It doesn't mean that this agreement then is no longer valid. It should still be valid. That provision itself will not be valid, but the agreement itself in its entirety continues to be valid. All right. If it is determined that any provision of the agreement violates any law, which is illegal, you cannot write an agreement that violates the law, or is otherwise invalid or unenforceable, then that provision shall be revised to the extent necessary to make that provision legal and enforceable. right? For instance, in the movie, what is it, Liar Liar or something like that with Jim Carrey? I don't know if you remember that movie. The person that was married got married when she was a minor on that movie. And because she was a minor, right? Basically, she was not entitled to what is the name? Well, she wasn't really entitled to like alimony and things like that because she was a minor. I think it was in the story. But then it turns out that she actually lied about her age. She actually wasn't a minor. She was an adult. She was lying. It was determined that then, wait a minute. So she is entitled to alimony. She was never a minor. She was never illegally married. She just lied about her age. So there was a dispute there. And what I'm trying to say is that because something wasn't enforceable doesn't mean that the rest of the law isn't enforceable. Maybe this wasn't the best example, but I was trying to contextualize that the law, like they could be an order that's actually illegal, like the marriage in that case was actually illegal if she was actually to be a minor. It would have been kind of illegal on that case, right? So what he's saying is if something illegal is being done, it's got to be amended so that it's enforceable and legal. So that provision alone. In such case, the agreement shall be construed to the fullest extent permitted by law to give effect to the parties' intentions and purpose by executing this agreement. It is what it is. I don't have much to explain on that one. Article 11, very important one, compensation. We talk so much about everything and we don't talk about compensation until the end almost, right? So section 11.1 for the architect's basic services described under Article 3, which you remember, right, includes mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structural, under Oz, includes like schematic design development, construction documents, all of that stuff. So the owner shall compensate the architect as follows. If it is a stipulated sum, you guys know what a stipulated sum is? Stipulated sum and fixed fee and lump sum are the same thing. It's a set amount. All right. We have stipulated the amount to be such. We have agreed or determined the amount to be such. Is this flat fee? They call it flat fee, fixed fee, stipulated sum, lump sum, same thing. It's just a number. Typically, we do projects and most of our little home addition projects are stipulated sum. Then percentage basis. Now, by the way, you got to pick one or the other. You cannot just be like doing, or maybe you can combine them, I think, but it would be very, very chaotic. So percentage basis. Percentage basis is like percentage of the cost of construction. We're doing $1 million house and we determine that we want to make 3% of the cost of construction. So, or 1% of the cost of construction, whatever that is. So that could be a thing. And that percentage, you put it in there, you're going to put a cost per percent of construction and the budget for the cost of the work as calculated in accordance with section 11.6. So you're going to, that's when the cost of the work is, budget that we put, it's important that, what was it? Cost estimate that we do, that's important. That's when it comes in handy. So and in any other method, you may determine another method. You're gonna pay me with potatoes. You're gonna give me 10,000 potatoes for my services. Whatever. You can determine it in whichever way you want. People trade services. I've traded services. I hire a plumber. He's doing a project for me. I did the design for his house. We traded the services. That's okay. It's okay. So 11.2. For the architect supplemental services designated in section 4.1.1 and for any sustainability services required pursuant to section 4.1.3. So you remember that section? There was a list of supplemental services. Remember all of them? Programming and analysis was one. Programming was one of them. So you got to put an amount here for that. 11.3 for additional services that may rise during the course of the project. Revisions of additional submittals, revision of the additional items or something. Inspections beyond the substantial completion inspection, right? Extras. You put an amount here. 11.4. Compensation for supplemental and additional services of the architect's consultants were not included in section 11.2 and 11.3. Shall be an amount invoiced to the architect plus a percentage. Very critical. This is gonna show up. I'm telling you right now, you're gonna have to deal with this. You make typically about 10% of what the consultant is charging. I think it's 10% or so. That's on the handbook of professional practice. So what I'm saying is that our mechanical engineer, if they charge $1,000, we're charging 10% of that $1,000. So what is 10% of $1,000? $100. So you would charge the client 1,100. Okay, make sense? And you say it in here. You state it. It's not something that you just made up. You just state it. Okay, they're not like hidden fees in here. It's like here it is. That's it. That's how it is. And you insert them out. So I actually have done 15%, I think, in some projects for the consultants and things like that. But I want you to go to the handbook of professional practice and see what they actually tell you that is kind of reasonable. They have amounts in there. So 11.5, when compensations for basic services is based on a stipulated sum or a percentage basis, the proportion of compensation for each phase of services shall be as follows. At Flow, we actually break it up like by what we do, like existing conditions, such design, schematic design, such construction documents, such, and things like that. So here you can either do a percentage or a cost, and you would, the total will be the 100%. And that's how you invoice. I'm sorry, guys. That's how you invoice. In the monthly progress, you invoice like that. So 11.6, when compensation is identified in section 11.1, is on percentage basis. Progress payments for each phase of basic services shall be calculated by multiplying the percentage identified in this article by the owner's most recent budget for the cost of the work. You know how the owner keeps updating the cost of the work throughout the phases, schematic, design development. So you're gonna pick whichever the latest is, and you're gonna multiply that by that percentage, okay? So does that would mean that I will make more money if the owner increases the budget and wins the lottery? Yes. It does also mean that you will be doing more work. All right. So compensation paid in previous progress payments shall not be adjusted based on the subsequent update. So no, the owner won the lottery today and you already finished the schematic design. You're getting paid more for construction documents and design development, but you're not getting paid more for the schematic design that you've already done. Okay. Unless you have to redo it. That's a different story. So 11.6.1, when compensation is on a percentage basis and any portions of the project are deleted or otherwise not constructed, compensation for those portions of the project shall be payable to the extent services are performed on those portions. Yeah, the owner won the lottery. You design a big house. Then the owner realized that he's got to give a lot of money to somebody else for some whatever reason. He lost some of that money. You've already designed that portion for that new design. So you got to get paid for that. Does it make sense? Like you got to get paid for what you've done for the budget that you did it for. So if they somehow go bankrupt, you still got to get paid for the big project. Doesn't matter. So the architect shall be entitled to compensation in accordance with this agreement for all services performed, whether or not the construction phase is commenced. To be quite honest, whether the project is built or not doesn't matter. For all those services that we do, we get paid. We've done a lot of theoretical projects here at Flow. We got to get paid for them. Doesn't matter. Sometimes the owners do come back and say, well, I didn't even build it. I'm like, why did design it? We did design it. Doesn't matter that you didn't get built.
I think something else to note is we are obliged to do pro bono work as well, as per like model code of ethics or code of conduct.
That is right. Now, it is not a contract thing. It's an ethical thing that we do pro bono work. We got to do pro bono work. So that's why Flow Design, one of the things that Flow Design does here at my office is we go to high schools, middle schools, and things like that and spend time with kids teaching them about architecture. We also donate funds directly, not just work, but also money to certain charities and things like that, which is all part of that standard, like ethical duty as a professional, you know? Like we not only, we're not just trying to do architecture, we're trying to really better humanity, right? Like there are a lot of good things that we're trying to do here. It's almost like, I know, some level of altruism, I think it is called, right? To what we do. So 11.7. There are, now, by the way, I know this may be confusing, Igo, because we're talking about percentages, we're talking about flat fees. They're different things. You following me so far? So like we could do a contract that we're charging a percentage of the cost of construction. And let's say this is the building. It's gonna be this, right? Like, and the building is $2 million. Like, we're gonna design a $2 million building. They gave us a budget at the beginning, and we say we're gonna charge 1% of that 2 million. We divide that 1% throughout the different phases of the project, like we stated in here. Okay, like 10%, 20%, 50%, whatever, and it has to add up to that. And the project ends up being like, it's 2 million. So you're gonna be charging, like, the schematic design is like, let's say 20% of the project. So 20% of the 2 million, of the not the 2 million, of the 3%, let's say it's 3% of the 2 million. So 20% of the 3% of the 2 million is what you're gonna charge. I gosh, I'm making it so difficult. Miranda, can you make it a little easier for me?
Um, so you're breaking down each phase as a percentage. So typically schematic design is 20% of the project, right?
Yeah,
Or
between
15?
20 or, yeah, 20, I think it's 20, then it's like 15,
Yeah.
20, 30. Then 10 is for CA, I think, or so. So yeah, it's on the handbook of professional practice. But you will charge that percent of that cost, Igo. All right. So like, you're not making the $3 million on the project cost. You're making the percent that you're charging off of that 3 million. And you're gonna divide it throughout the phases. And if it goes up, you increase it at the phase where it went up, not necessarily like previous phases. If not, still, if it's not a percentage, you will still break it up. Like, if you say I'm charging $10,000 for my services, you will break up the $10,000 by phase, and typically you invoice them monthly on the progress of that particular phase or the phases overall. Okay. And then we talk about hourly billing rates. The hourly billing rates for services for the architect and the architect consultants are set forth below. The rate shall be adjusted in accordance with the architects and architect consultants' normal review practices. Um, we haven't really increased our billing rates here at Flow as much, although our overhead has gone up and our expenses have gone up. That really means that our profit margin has gone down. Um, but but you have to, in your contract, state what your rates are so that people know what they're paying for. Okay. And these ones are usually good for like additional services that you cannot anticipate how much it's gonna take, how long it's gonna take. You say, you know what, I'm gonna do that hourly. Like, sometimes Marcos does like code reviews and zoning reviews hourly. It takes him like an hour to do them, or 2 hours. If he was to sell, if we were to sell that here Flow as a service, it probably will cost more than the hourly, because of the value that it also brings. But now I don't want to teach you about value. I'm trying to teach you about the AIA contract. But long story short, that's, you put all the salaries, and in the exam expect to have something like this with the different rates for everybody. And let's say the owner wants such and such to do such and such, and they spend such and such amount of hours. You got to be able to calculate how much is that change order cost, or how much did it cost. And it's simple. It's the hourly rate times the amount of hours spent on the project. Okay. And it may be a combination of hourly rates. It may be 3 different people that they put on the project. So you got to find them all. And they may have spent different amount of hours. So it can get very tricky. But it's all about analysis. And the word analysis is really brought up a lot on these exams, because you got to be able to break things into their pieces. That's what analysis is. You break it up into their pieces and make sense of them. Okay. Compensation for reimbursable expenses. Reimbursable expenses are things that you do, that you not necessarily work that you do, but things that you buy or use, or tools and things like that that are not necessarily like you can't anticipate it. One example is cost of paper. How much paper did we use printing? Another one is mileage. How many miles did we drive? Another one is like long distance calls and things like that you may have had to do, or certain travels and flights that you may have had to do for the project. You put them all in here. And those costs got to be paid by the owner additionally to what you have already contracted, put in there for the work itself. And I'm going to try to speed read through this. Reimbursable expenses are in addition to compensation for basic, supplemental, and additional services, and include expenses incurred by the architect and the architect consultants directly related to the project, as follows: transportation and authorized out-of-town travel and subsistence, like food. That's what it's really talking about. Long distance services, dedicated data and communication services, teleconferences, project websites, and extranets. Permitting and other fees required by authorities have jurisdiction over the project. Printing, reproductions, plots, and standard form documents. Postage, handling and delivery. Expense of overtime, work requiring higher than regular rates if authorized in advance by the owner. Renderings, physical models, mock-ups, professional photography, and presentation materials requested by the owner or required for the project. So I can go on and on the details of some of these things, but I want you guys to come up with some questions later on and just ask me. Like I do photography for all my projects. I don't charge it to the owner. I pay for them because they're for me. If the owner wants those photos, they gotta pay me for them. That's different. So and things like that. Now you gotta. It says this word right here is very important. In advance, authorization in advance. You gotta tell them, I'm going to be doing this. I'm going to be doing that. I'm going to be doing this. Or hey, I may need to do this. It's gonna cost this much. Do you want us to proceed? If they don't want us to proceed, then you don't proceed, and that's it. It's gonna hurt the project in some way. You gotta let them know about it. If required by the owner and with the owner's prior written approval, the architect's consultant's expenses of professional liability insurance dedicated exclusively to this project. The project is huge and they never really carry that kind of insurance. So any extra money, it's got to be paid by the owner if they agree. Or other expense additional insurance coverage or limits in excess of that normally maintained by the architect's consultant. All taxes levied on professional services and unreimbursable expenses. Side office expenses. Registration fees and any other fees charged by the certifying authority or by other entities as necessary to achieve a sustainable objective, like LEED certifications and things like that. But registration fees really also has to do with licensure, which is kind of odd because I don't think I don't want to confuse you here, but I don't think they should be paying for your licenses. That's an expense of doing business from their office, which gets added into the rates for everybody. That's part of the payroll board, like the billing rates. All right. But they talk about these because they talk about a sustainable project. Like they talk about a particular project that requires it. I'll tell you an example. We work with this design builder out of New Hampshire. We weren't licensed in New Hampshire. They sent this project to us, and I said to them, listen, we will get licensed in New Hampshire for you if you want us to, but you will pay half of that licensure cost for the initial licensure. They agree. We did it. If the owner comes to us and says, well, okay, I want this project to be LEED certified, I say, listen, we're not LEED certified, but if you want to go with us, we're going to get certified and we're going to go through the jostle and the hurdle of getting it done, but you will pay for those fees. Okay. And they'll pay for them. That's it. Other similar project related expenditures. Sure. Anything else that's would be within that. So section 11.8.2 for reimbursable expenses for compensation shall be, okay, for reimbursable expenses, the compensation shall be the expenses incurred by the architect and the architect consultants plus. Yes, there is a plus. So for instance, I don't print certain size of paper. And even if I was, I would charge for the printing. Not only the cost that I have for the printing, but I also got to make a profit on that. All right. It's like a markup. All right. So sometimes I go to another store and I print for the client, but I charge for the print plus a percentage. Why? Well, I had to go there and I had to get one of my guys here that I pay hourly for, right? So like there is a cost of the transaction. You know, I call it a convenience fee or whatever, right? For doing the transaction, you got to charge. This is a good one. Architect insurance. If the types and limits of coverage required by section 2.5 are in addition to the types and limits the architect normally maintains, the owner shall pay the architect for the additional costs incurred by the architect for the additional coverages as set forth below. All right. Does it make sense, everybody? All right, so we're gonna go to section 11.10, payment to the architect, initial payments. An initial payment of, this is kind of like a deposit. A lot of people call it retainer. Shall be made upon execution of this agreement and is the minimum payment under this agreement. It shall be credited to the owner's account in the final invoice. It's kind of like a consultation fee too. It could be called. Oh, nah, it's actually a deposit. It's really a deposit, not a consultation fee. So 11.10.1.2, if the sustainability certification is part of the sustainable objective, an initial payment of the architect to the architect of such and such shall be made upon execution of this agreement for registration fees and other fees payable to the certifying authority and necessary to achieve the sustainability certification. The architect's payment to the certifying authority shall be credited to the owner's account at the time the expense is incurred. So progress payments, unless otherwise agreed, payments for the services shall be made monthly in proportion to the services performed. Payments are due and payable upon presentation of the architect's invoice, amount unpaid, certain amount, then you put days here. Amounts unpaid, let's say 10 days after the invoice, they shall bear interest at the rate entered below. Here at Flow, we don't do interest, we do like a $50 per month fee. It's the equivalent of interest. Or in the absence thereof, at the legal rate prevailing from time to time at the principal place of business of the architect. And you put the interest in here. Section 11.10.2.2, the owner shall not withhold amounts from the architect compensation to impose penalty or liquidated damages on the architect or to offset sums requested or paid to contractor for the cost of changes in the work unless the architect agrees or has been found liable for the amounts in the binding dispute resolution proceeding. Section 11.10.2.3, records of reimbursable expenses pertaining to supplemental and additional services and services performed on the basis of hourly rates shall be available to the owner at mutually convenient times. So like you can break it up to them and show them all the receipts and everything at their convenience. Now that's also called a timesheets. Keep track of your timesheets because the timesheets are a good way of showing people what you worked on that date and putting a good record of what it was done and why it was done. Same thing with expenses. I want people, you know, ideally here at Flow or any office. Now this is my opinion. Anything that you spend, just keep the receipts. Like if you went to a site visit and you had to eat a burger along the way, keep a receipt, bring it over to the office. It should be a reimbursable expense because you probably brought food to the office. You didn't get to eat your food because you had to eat out. And even if you brought food, it's the cost of surviving. It's the cost of living, right? Like it's the cost of the work. So keep receipt of keep track of mileage when you drive from one site to another site from the office, things like that, you know. And always I would say discuss with your principals about it. Like, is it, you know, I got a call from somebody here at the office that said, hey, I drove to such and such site. It was X amount of miles. You know, at timesheets, there is a section to put the miles and there's a multiplier because there's a multiplier set by the state that we follow on that. And like we haven't been charging our clients because our staff members haven't been telling us that they've been driving those things. I mean, I can't keep track of all the driving that everybody does. They got to keep track of their driving. So I would say, you know, learn those good practices and keep track of them. so that we can, at the end, so that we can also justify to the owner, hey, yeah, we did drive to that site at that particular time, at that particular day. Then we go to Article 12, special terms and conditions. By the way, this Article 11, I want you to read it again. And I want you to repeat this again. And I wasn't as detailed as I wish I could have been, but I said I was going to finish this B101 today, so we're going to finish it today. All right. But there's a lot in there that you will be using on practice management, project management, construction evaluation, or in life. Article 12, the special terms and conditions. So if there is any special terms and conditions, they just insert them right here, or put in they call it exhibit or an attachment. Article 13, scope of the agreement. This agreement represents the entire and integrated agreement between the owner and the architect and supersedes all prior negotiations, representations, or agreements, either written or oral. This agreement may be amended only by written instrument signed by both the owner and the architect. This agreement is comprised of the following documents identified below. So the B101, the E203, and because this is part of this, I want you to read the E203. And then any exhibits, which this ones you can read if you want to. I don't think they're critical for the exam. And then anything else. And then look, this is where we sign it. The owner, the architect. This is where we sign it. And capiche, this is the end of the B101. I know it was long. I know it took a lot of sessions, but it's really important. It's really how we do business. All right. And if you guys have any questions, comment on the YouTube channel, comment on them, and we'll continue from there. All right. Thank you so much. God bless you. Bye.